welcome into this week's book club episode for Most Wanted by Rae Carson. We're looking at this book 2 chapters at a time, diving into the themes and happenings to talk about all of the stuff that's going on. And if you have not been following the series from the beginning, you can go ahead and click here, and it will take you to a playlist where you can join us back from the start. But today we're going to be talking about chapters 7 and 8. Now, these were 2 very action-packed chapters, I almost said episodes, but where we had left off in the story, Sulo and Qi'ra and Han were hanging out at Old Man Palo's house, and they were presumably discovered, and they had to go on the run. So what we see here is the kind of continuation of their chase that ultimately leads to a street race. So there was a lot more action, even in a book that had already been action-packed. I remember this street race from when I first read the book a couple years ago, and was excited to get back to this part. Lots of humor and everything as always, but let's start talking about the kind of individual things that happen. As I said, we meet our heroes with the need to run and go somewhere. They don't necessarily know where that somewhere is. Here presents a problem for Qi'ra. Qi'ra had actually tried to talk about this earlier in the story and had gotten interrupted, if I remember correctly. But basically, she has a safe house, and she offers up this safe house to Han and Sulo for them to hide in, and she's surprised that she is saying to do so. Qi'ra is somebody who has her secrets, and her secrets are her greatest defense, and we see that in Solo: A Star Wars Story, and we're seeing it here with her at a younger age. Qi'ra is all about information, and information for her is power, which means if people know things about her, they would have power over her. So she's not somebody that's really inclined to tell anyone what she's up to, but she is in a situation where she needs to be protected, and she also knows the right thing is to help her friends, and this is kind of throwing her ways of doing things into a hitch. So that is the quandary she is met with at the beginning of the episode, and as always, she is frustrated by Han, because Han is going on about his instinct, and I really like how she describes, she's like, he thinks it's a gut instinct, and it could really just be gas. It's funny to watch somebody like her be so involved with Han, because we're all used to Han. Like, Han doing all of these things makes total sense to us, like, unless, obviously, if you're a newer fan and this is one of your introductions, maybe not so much, but people who've kind of been around for a while, like, this is just what Han Solo does. And it's funny to watch somebody on the other side, like, not understand that this is Han Solo. And I really like the interplay between the 2 characters because of that. When they go to leave, Palo is not happy that his friends are leaving, and sort of almost chases after them, even denies a dog biscuit to be happy at their leaving, and is described as, like, basically wailing as they leave. I like how it's a little bit ambiguous here, like, is he sad because friends are food and his food got away, or is he sad because he lost his friends and he doesn't know how to deal with that because he's clearly kind of different socially. I still love his character. His character is a lot of fun because you just never really know what he's gonna do, and yet whenever he does something, it feels completely in character. But now everybody is on the run, they're heading down the streets. Qi'ra says where they have to go to get to her safe house. Sulo knows a way they can get to the safe house, but they have to get to the thing that gets them to the safe house, and that's what the rest of this chapter is. They decide that the quickest way to get to the vehicle they need is to swim, and that leads them to the Cistrine of Discipline, which sounds like so much fun. As they run, there's kind of like a sequence of events where, like, no one is really telling each other anything because everyone's kind of slowly revealing their secret. Like, Qi'ra knows where they're going, but she doesn't want to say why. Sulo knows what they're going to be riding in, but later on, when they get on the other end of the Cistrine, Han is like, well, if you just had told me where we were going, I would have known a better way to get there than this way. So we're seeing 3 people trying to trust each other, 3 people trying to get to know each other and survive, but releasing that information slowly, and because they're releasing that information slowly, it gets them maybe in a little bit more trouble than it could if they had just been open. But on the flip side, you still don't know they still don't know if it's safe for them to be open at this point. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this chamber, because this chamber is wild. There was one line in here that actually kind of took me from fun adventure to, like, mildly sad, or actually radically sad. So they're describing or this place is described as, it's a place where you can kind of go and find some stuff that you might be able to eat, but really, it's a place where white worm kids are like dropped off and they have to swim, and if they swim and make it, they've earned forgiveness. And Qi'ra talks about how it's difficult for the younger ones, and it makes me think of like, how young are you when you get put in this gang, and like, what is young to swim? And like, it was one of those kind of like really darker turns that the story kind of dances around, and this book kind of does that, where it's like, yeah, it's a fun adventure, and the book is supposed to be a fun adventure, and it's supposed to be a tie-in book to a movie that's a fun adventure, but like, it never lets you forget that everything that's going on is actually kind of horrible and really horrible. And so that was just one of those, like, I just wanted to stop and go, oh, this is literally named Of Discipline. Like, this is literally a place where they have to go and earn some sort of grace back if they screw up. I also just kind of appreciated the imagery, the symbol, I don't know, metaphor of, this is a place where they probably had to swim, if not these three characters, certainly characters in the White Worm gang, and they would certainly understand it, where they would have to swim back to Proxima, and the way back to this person who's bad to them, kind of presumably swimming the other way, is their escape from said person. And so this idea of they are escaping through like this reverse punishment, I thought was pretty critical as well. Now, before they swim, there was a interesting moment with Qi'ra and Sulo where they're surrounded by the hounds, and Sulo is like running to go address the hounds. And if we kind of remember, Sulo is the guy that's had the dog biscuits this whole time, and Qi'ra is like, is Sulo going to sacrifice himself for us? Why would he do that? He has the data cube and he shouldn't do that. And I just think Qi'ra is so funny to me. Like, she's so good with information, but she's so bad with people. And she has this kind of awkward moment of thinking, he's going to, save himself. And she even yells, don't do it. And Sulo's like, what do you mean don't do it? I'm just going to give him some dog biscuits. It was just kind of a quirky moment for her. But I think it's also a telling moment of, she has not the best read on people at this point, and I think that's something that kind of gets her into trouble, and also would be why she would become a person who has such a good read on people by the time we get to Solo, that this is something that she would kind of overcome. And by that, I mean, she does have a good read on people. We saw in the first bit of the book where, she can tell how Han operates, and she knows how to talk to him in a way that doesn't let him win, and she knows, like, everybody's kind of critical weakness. So she is good at people when it comes to thinking through them, and I don't want to say how to use them because I don't think she's that selfish yet, but in thinking through how to interact with them. But in terms of understanding their motivations, she's not the greatest. Like, she can read Han and know how to talk to Han, but she trusts Proxima and she doesn't know why Sulo is doing what he's doing. She can get the reason behind people, but she can't get the heart behind people yet. And I think that's part of what fascinates her about Han so much, is because she can understand him so well and then she can't. And I think that's where some of her frustration with his character comes in as well. Now, on the other side, they go through a door and it takes them to a racing garage. Here we find out that Sulo has a brother who is a racer, and they're trying to maybe get his racer. Qi'ra is like, well, can't we just borrow, like, anyone's? And Han has a line of, like, you can't just borrow someone's speeder. That's like borrowing their spouse or their soul. And that's something that Qi'ra doesn't understand. But that's something that's just so Han Solo, and I like that Sulo kind of understands it too. It's just like, somebody's speeder on a planet like Corellia is their life. It's their livelihood. It's their thing. It's probably the only thing they own. Seeing how Han would understand that, and for Qi'ra, it's like just another possession. It sets up a lot of what's going to happen, and even some stuff that we've seen in Solo. We go to chapter 8, and this is where they kind of go after Sulo's brother. Han doesn't want to hurt anyone. He's not out to hurt anyone. He doesn't really like the idea of having to knock Sulo's brother out, so he ends up just kind of like gagging him and trying to stuff him off to the side. And it's Qi'ra who actually throws the punch, which I think is great. She's the one who's just like, nope, this is what we're doing. We're going to take this thing. I think part of it could just be that whole understanding the speeder, the spiritualness of a speeder thing, but part of it, I think, is Han is that guy who's like, no, I just want to be out here to make friends, and Qi'ra is like, I have to survive. Qi'ra didn't necessarily, like, I don't see her getting in too many, like, situations where she's stealing speeders. So this might be a new experience for her as well. But before the brother gets knocked out, Sulo makes a line of, like, this is how you're spending our inheritance. So you can, the book references several times that Sulo does not like his brother. Sulo is obviously living in a gang while his brother is, like, souping up a speeder, so clearly there's something going on there. You know, why did they separate? Why don't they get along? Sulo's brother is not helping Sulo out. Sulo apparently would rather be a part of this gang than take part in what his brother is doing. Here, I'd said that, you know, we're kind of learning all of the different secrets about characters. We learn about Qi'ra's with her safe house, and we learn about Sulo with his family, and then we'll learn about Han and how he has a speeder here that's being kept in this garage, and that was kind of his secret. Now we have the three characters with kind of their... I mean, in Sulo's case, it's not like a possession secret, but it is, like, the reason why he might not have a possession secret. And so we're seeing what drives the characters that we're kind of staying with. Speaking of driving, they throw Sulo's brother inside of the empty engine compartment in Han's speeder. Han is able to talk the local droid into not ratting them out if he will undo the brother's speeder, and then they literally race off. And I love the description of the speeder, like, it's so hyped up and obnoxious and terrible. Even at the expense of not being the best for racing, it is good. Like, it does seem to get them there even faster than Han would think it would, but that it's more about style than substance. The race starts out with Qi'ra driving. Now, here's a control issue with Qi'ra again. She knows how to get there, so in her mind, her driving probably makes the most sense, and she doesn't have to give instructions. She believes she has knowledge of how to drive. She doesn't necessarily know if the other two have knowledge on how to drive. So she's like, nope, I'm not dealing with Han's gut instinct anymore. I'm gonna drive, I'm gonna leave the group, and everybody's gonna have to do what I want to do. The problem is, Qi'ra doesn't really know how to drive. She's not necessarily a bad driver, she's probably just radically inexperienced and doesn't understand how things work. But I like the idea of how she's like, no, I'm gonna bank this turn this way because I understand the physics. Like, I read the physics in a book somewhere, so I know how to do a fast bank turn. And Han and Sulo are like, what are you doing? And then later, they're trying to tell her about a switchback turn, and she's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. We wouldn't turn that way because it would take us in the wrong way. And they're like, that's the point of the course, is you go out of the way a little bit and then you go back. And she's just so logical that she doesn't really get driving, and I think that's funny. Like, she's just overthinking it way too much, like she does so many other things. And driving is something where there is a concrete objective map. You have a route. There is physics involved. It is something you need to think about, but it is also something you need to do instinctually, and that's something that she hasn't really developed. I also just thought it was handled really well, because what you have, and this is something that struck me when I read the book the first time. I had talked a couple videos ago about when Qi'ra gets the nice clothes and how she responded to the nice clothes, and how that was done really well, in my opinion, because she's not the most stereotypically feminine character, and that's something I can kind of connect to with her in these books, but she can also appreciate something that's pretty. And so it was dealing with something that's very typically a female character stereotype in a book, but in a way that I thought was really, really intelligent. Here we have another kind of female stereotype. Qi'ra, and, like, I feel like this is an older stereotype, and maybe not something that as many people would be as aware of, just because I don't hear about it as much, but I don't know. But there's the stereotype, right, that supposedly men are better drivers than women. And in this case, you have Han Solo, who's one of the best pilots and drivers in existence, so he's going to be better than just about anybody you could have stuck in that speeder. But you need to do this in a way that it's like Han is just better because he's Han, and not Han is just better because Qi'ra is a woman and can't drive. And to avoid that. And obviously you can avoid that because there's a million reasons why Qi'ra can't drive. None of these kids can really, because they don't have the opportunity to learn. Qi'ra overthinking makes total sense. It's not something where I'm saying, like, something in this book was going to be innately sexist, inherently sexist. Like, this could have been done with way less nuance, and it would have been fine, because it makes sense. Like, Han Solo is one of the best pilots in the galaxy, if not the best pilot in the galaxy. But it was just, there was so much care taken to, like, let Han be like, hey, you know, she's had lessons. Maybe she can do it. You know, the fact that Han isn't huffy, that Qi'ra is driving, that he's willing to yield to her, that he only kind of steps in when they're literally about to crash, and to still show Han, like, being supportive of giving her, like, a shot, and then having Qi'ra's reasons for wanting to drive in the first place makes sense, have Qi'ra's reasons for not being able to. I just felt like there was a lot of nuance that I really responded to the first time I read this book. And maybe it doesn't matter to you, and I'm not saying it has to matter to you, and I'm not saying this needs to be a big thing, but it's just something with Qi'ra's character that I responded to so many times when I read it, that there are things about her where she's existing in this space that could have been done in a very stereotypical way, but were actually done in this very nuanced way, and it wasn't done by making her, like, super, like, hyper stereotypically feminine, or by making her super hyper stereotypical tomboy. That she is her own character, kind of moving between all of these different ideas, because her culture isn't Western US culture. Her culture is, she's literally trash growing up on the streets. You know, she's a scum rat, and how she would understand who she is and what her identity would be, and how she would see herself. And so, I don't know, the only reason why I bring it up is I personally feel like Qi'ra is a very intelligently written character, and I mean she is intelligent in of herself, but I mean, like, a lot of care went into the crafting of her character and the motivations of what she's doing in a way that makes me really happy. And if it means nothing to you, it means nothing to you, that's fine, but, like, just my own experience in reading this book, that was something I connected to. There's some nuanced lines in here for Han as well that actually happened before the race, but when they're trying to hotwire Sulo's brother's car, Sulo talks about how, you know, he believes in the Force and he can do things because of the Force, and I like Han's thought line of, like, Han's not a religious person, but he doesn't really mind if people are religious as long as they don't bother him about it, which is a very common thought pattern. And discussion of religion in Star Wars is something that's always interesting to me, because in the context of Star Wars, the religion is understood to be true, and, like, anybody watching Star Wars understands that the Force is real. The Force is shown to be real. It's something that's very tangible. You can watch Jedi levitate things with their mind. Like, there's evidence for the proof of the thing that is religious in Star Wars. I enjoy reading those, like, very earthbound phrases in the discussion of religion in something in Star Wars, where in this particular case the religion is provable. And so I don't know, I found that exchange to be amusing. I also think it's funny because Han goes so much on his gut, but then thinks it's weird that somebody else is like, well, the Force is guiding me. It's like, well, it's kind of the same thing, Han, and in Star Wars it is kind of the same thing. I also liked Sulo's line of, he said, I never ask how I'm going to do something, I just believe I can do it. I don't know if this is intentional or not, but it made me think of Han's line in The Force Awakens. Somebody's like, is this possible? And he's like, I never ask myself that question until I've already done it. Which is not the same line at all, but, like, thematically kind of similar, and I wonder, I guess I personally choose to believe that that's a through line from Sulo from his younger days, but we don't really know that for a fact. At the end of the chapter, they end up in an area that belongs to the silo, or the area of the silo. We don't know a whole lot about them, other than we hear that line in Solo: A Star Wars Story where Qi'ra is talking to Proxima, and Proxima says, remember the silo, you know, and saying don't throw your life away for Han, like, I've pulled you out of something really terrible. So we kind of know that there's something going on with Qi'ra in this area of the silo, and where her safe house would be. The other characters in the story besides Qi'ra obviously would not necessarily know, so that's something we're going to learn about more later on in the book. But at the end of the story is effectively Qi'ra saying, we're home, I guess. Like, she's saying this is the closest thing she has, and we get to Qi'ra's secret. But that's where I'm going to leave this story for this week. Like I said, enjoy the chapters. There was a lot of action. Usually when there's a lot of action, it makes it more fun to read. I usually have a little bit less to talk about, but there was plenty that I really connected to and enjoyed in these two chapters. For next week, we're going to read chapters 9 and 10 as we move along. We're making really good pace through the book, as is. I'm really enjoying it. I hope you guys are too. Leave me a comment with what your thoughts are so far in the story. If you're not already following us on all the socials, please do so. And I will talk to you guys next week.